Hi, welcome back to Rising Stars. This is Jessica Assefa, and I'm here with Mick Twomey. And we are, of course, here to talk about the final rule. So for those of you who believe in CMS, the Easter Bunny delivered a final rule this weekend. And as you digested those over 700 pages, along with your Easter meal, you probably noticed that not too much has changed from what they proposed. Minor differences. So they're moving forward. Not too much has changed, but it sure got a whole lot more real. I will say that. They're still moving forward with the proposal finalized, removing all of those operational measures. So making this the last year for the foreign language and TTY calls. No more after that. And next year is the last year for the rest of those operational measures. This is also the last year for SPC. CMS's logic is that that's more than adequately captured on the Part D side with SUPD. So no more SPC. Diabetes eye, they made a decision to retain. Their logic was that it aligns with MAHA, being that it is a measure of chronic disease control. Also, it's the only measure in the STAR schema that looks at visual health. So they're keeping that one on. Of course, HEI, HO for all, is never going to see the light of day, and the reward factor is here to. So hearing a lot of chatter from health plans about what measures are CMS going to replace this with. I don't know about you, Mick, but my answer is nothing. I think they were very clear about their intent to streamline the program, to reduce the measures, and they've asked repeatedly what other measures can we take out of the STARS program. And what we'll likely see instead, I'm thinking, is a swap out of process measures for outcomes measures. So the easy ones continue to move out, and the more challenging measures continue to move in, maybe even more patient-reported outcome measures via HOS. So watch your PF-ADL performance. CMS also provided a very high-level overview of how these changes may play out for different plans based on contract type and contract size. To keep it short, sweet, and concise, the bottom line is our SNP plans, highly dual plans, were slightly more negatively impacted than non-dual plans. So we see a little bit, even though 65% of them showed no change, those that did, the SNP plans seemed to have more loss of a half a star, where the non-dual plans didn't really experience that to the same extent. And that's important because we focus on QBP, and we should, but there's also financial gain and loss at the half-star level that's significant depending on your enrollment size. We also saw that play out, and even more so by plan size in CMS's math, where we're seeing the larger contracts much less negatively impacted than the smaller contracts. I think about 22% of the large contracts actually improved by half a star, so some gain in rebate dollars, where only 12% of the small contracts, so about half, are going to realize that improvement. So in true CMS fashion, they did this analysis not only at a very high level, but using very historic data. I know, and you've been mathing this out as you always do. You took it about 10 levels deeper, and I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about how this really might play out in our strategy and affect each of us sitting in STAR leadership chairs.
Excellent. And I have to say, this is some of the most fun stuff I think that we do. And, maybe that says something about us, that this is just fun. It's always interesting to me to see how, CMS is going to portray, what the changes are going to be versus how we choose to look at it. And, CMS is obviously, being honest and true and, with all of that, but they look at it a little bit differently than we do. I think what we try to do is, instead of just going to run the risk of reporting the news, we actually try to look into this, take a step back. What does this mean about kind of the real world implications of these changes? How do you think about that for your contract? What does this mean to you in terms of, how does this adjust my strategic planning,
right.
in the next years, right? So actually, let me share something real quick. Okay. So if you look at that 200 and whatever page document that came out, on page 138, it says most contracts, 63%, would have no change in their overall rating. And again, I think they looked at the STARS 2025 results, but with 26 factors and these changes. And so while that's true, what you have here, I think that paints a different picture than I would probably want to see if I were running a STARS organization, because I think we'd want to look in and really understand how this is going to impact us, where we're going to see it. So what we did is we looked at the actual scores. So instead of 63% of plans didn't change a star rating, because if you think about it, you could be a 3.26 or a 3.74 and still be a 3.5 star. So you've got a wide range, right, that you can drop. So when we looked at just the scores, and this is for STARS 2026 results, but applying these changes, 448 contracts, like 89% of all the rated contracts saw their scores decline with this change by an average of 20 points. A handful of the contracts were held constant, same exact score, and then about 9% actually saw their scores improve. And what I think is interesting is we saw 41 of those 448 contracts that saw their scores decline actually fell out of QBP. So cost them about 1.28 billion in estimated quality bonus payments. So it has a real impact on this. There were some other ones that we were looking at that I found interesting, right? Because Jessica, you'll remember, like when we were looking at some of the changes before, they tended to be more heavily impacted against the high-performing contracts.
Right.
We didn't really see that. I mean, you had an impact in terms of number of high-performing. Like we had 205 4 stars or higher contracts in STARS 2026. But applying these, that number drops to 173. So pretty significant impact. And then we didn't see higher performing plans getting more negatively impacted necessarily. There were 171 contracts that were 4 stars or higher that dropped about 21 points. And I thought this was interesting. 77 of the 298 contracts under 4 stars, vast majority of those contracts dropped an average of 19 points. So, when I think about, like, what does this mean? I think what this is telling us and about how do we think about strategy going forward is it's pretty clear, right? It is getting harder and harder to achieve and maintain 4 stars. So I'll pop back here and stop sharing. But any of that stuff jumping out at you, I think that there are a lot of different things to consider. I'll pause if you've got anything to jump in on real quick.
Definitely. I think, first and foremost, there's just nobody's in the safe zone, right? Like you said, when we did the other analysis, there's like, okay, because my population doesn't include so much of this demographic or does, or et cetera, I'm probably safer or less impacted by this change. It seems like with this methodological enhancement, change, whatever you want to call it, I think, and STARS program change, everyone's going to really feel the pinch and feel the hurt. So there's no one that doesn't need to go back and remath. Well,
yeah, I think you're exactly right. And I like the remath comment because it really does change everything. If you think about it, before you were kind of able to skate by if you had an osteo at 2 stars, everything else doing well. But with this, the weight was 100 plus in STARS 2025. It's just over 50-ish, when you get to STARS 2029. So essentially every measure means twice as much as it used to. And I think that plays out in a number of different ways. One, you've got the traditional, we've got to get, we got to improve our star ratings on a measure, right? But then you also have implications to the 5-weighted QI measures, to now the reward factor sticking around. Because even based on that weight change or reduction of measures, like a breast cancer screening, a one measure, if you bump that up a point, A star rating, that'll already add 2 points to your score. A 3-weight, 6 points, and the QI ratings, 9 points. So you really need to start thinking about these and how they play in.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think plans, to your point, as if we didn't have to be strategic before. This just amplifies that. And not only mathematically strategic, but you've said before now, every measure mattered before, but now you say every measure matters even more, is what I'm hearing you say. And thinking below that, not only that, every member matters even more, right? I mean, even more so, do you not only have to identify the subset of measures you must move all of them, but the subset you really must move, but who are the members sitting in there that you must move? I think you have to be really laser focused there. Now more than ever, can you not get away with these boil the ocean strategies to close star gaps and move measure rates?
Well, no, I think you're exactly right. And I think the ones, the plans that I think are going to win are the ones that really have that deep connection to members and have the member intelligence, understand where people are likely going to place them in these survey measures that are now a big percentage again. And I'm looking, we got about a minute to go. So let me just do the last couple of topics that I think are just interesting. So again, QI. We always talk about how important it is, and it just keeps getting more and more important, right? If you can bump each one of those up, each one of those two measures up, 1-star rating, that adds 20 points to your score. Also takes away if you drop. So very, very, I think, impactful to make sure that that's being included in target setting and shared with measure owners. And then reward factor, the other one, those thresholds are likely going to come down, the mean variance or the mean threshold. And so it is going to be a 4-star maker again this year, but variance going to be a lot more fickle with fewer measures. But I would say those two things I would put high on the priority of knocking out, making sure you got a good focus on.
Yeah, 100%. So definitely, I think too, go back, redo the math. What do you look like? What does your contract look like with these new changes applied? And then once you've found the measure pathway, I think digging in and finding the members is really going to be step 2.
Yeah, thanks everybody, and we'll have more later.